The Celestial Harbor was the kind of establishment that catered to the galaxy's elite. Perched on the upper levels of Station Osiris 9, it offered panoramic views of the Andromeda Gate and served delicacies from 40 different star systems. Scarlet had worked there for 3 standard years, navigating the complex social hierarchies of a dozen alien species with practiced ease tonight. However, her patience was wearing thin. The 3 Velcrin nobles occupied the corner booth, their crystalline exoskeletons refracting the ambient light into prismatic patterns across the walls. They had ordered extensively Andromedan caviar, synthesized plutonian wine, and the chef's specialty, flash-frozen nebula essence served on beds of ionized vapor. The bill had climbed to 18,000 credits, more than Scarlet made in 2 months. "Your payment, honored guests," Scarlet said, maintaining the professional smile she'd perfected over countless shifts. She placed the holographic bill before the largest Velcrin, whose name translated roughly to Crimson of the Highest Peak. The alien's compound eyes swiveled to regard her with something approaching amusement. "Payment?" His voice emerged as a series of harmonic chimes, translated instantly by her neural implant. "I think not." Scarlet's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, sir, but do you know who we are?" Interrupted the second Velcrin, smaller but adorned with more elaborate crystalline growths. "We are nobility of the Velcrin hegemony. We do not pay for services rendered by lesser species." The third Velcrin clicked his mandibles in agreement, a sound like breaking glass. "Consider it an honor that beings of our stature even deigned to consume food prepared by your primitive hands." Scarlet felt her face flush, but she kept her voice steady. "Station regulations require payment for all services, regardless of regulations." Crimson of the Highest Peak rose to his full height, nearly 7 feet of gleaming alien superiority. "Your human regulations are meaningless to us. We have diplomatic immunity. Now remove yourself from our sight before we file a complaint about your insolence." Other patrons were beginning to stare. Scarlet recognized a Thoraxian ambassador to Signan Merchants, and several other high-profile clients. Her manager, a nervous Palian named Zix, was already scurrying over, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. "Is there a problem?" Zix whispered, though everyone could hear the tremor in his synthesized voice. Before Scarlet could respond, a human voice cut through the tension. "Yep, there's a problem." Julian stood from his table near the window. He wasn't impressive by galactic standards, just 6 feet of average human build, wearing a worn leather jacket over a simple shirt. His dark hair was slightly too long, and his face bore the kind of scars that came from actual physical labor, not cosmetic enhancements. He looked utterly unremarkable compared to the crystalline magnificence of the Velcrin nobles. He also looked absolutely furious. "Julian, please," Scarlet began, but he was already walking toward the Velcrin table. "I couldn't help but overhear," Julian said, his voice dangerously calm. "You 3 ate 18,000 credits worth of food, and now you're refusing to pay because ... What? You think you're too good for basic decency?" Crimson of the Highest Peak's eyes focused on Julian with undisguised contempt. "Another human. How tedious. This does not concern you, primitive." Julian smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Actually, it does. See Scarlet here, she's my friend, and where I come from, we don't let our friends get cheated." "Your friendship is irrelevant," said the second Velcrin. "We owe nothing to servants, right?" Julian pulled out his personal data. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pay your bill, plus a 20% gratuity, or I'm going to make your lives very complicated." The Velcrin clicked their mandibles in unison. "You, a single human with no authority, no wealth, and no standing. What could you possibly do to us?" Julian's fingers moved across his datapad. "Well, let's see. I'm a salvage operator. I spend most of my time pulling wrecks out of debris fields and selling them to recyclers. Not glamorous work, but it means I know a lot of people. Dock workers, maintenance crews, the folks who keep stations like this running." He looked up, meeting Crimson's compound eyes. "I also know how to access public records. For instance, I know that your ship, the Radiant Supremacy, is currently docked at Bay 47, and I know that you're diplomatic. Immunity only covers you personally, not your vessel." The Velcrin shifted uncomfortably. "I also know," Julian continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge, "that your ship underwent a standard customs scan when you docked. But here's the thing about standard scans, they're pretty shallow. They don't catch everything. Now, I'm betting that 3 nobles like you might have some, let's call them undeclared items on board. Velcrin nobility are known for their exotic collections." Crimson's crystalline structure seemed to dim slightly. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I absolutely would. One call to my friend in customs, and your ship gets a deep scan. Full cargo inspection. Could take weeks. And during that time, your ship stays impounded. Julian shrugged. Of course, if everything's perfectly legal, you've got nothing to worry about. But if there's even one undeclared item, say, some Andromedan artifacts that require special permits, well, that's a whole legal nightmare. The restaurant had gone silent. Even Zix had stopped fidgeting. But wait, there's more, Julian said, warming to his theme. You mentioned diplomatic immunity. Thing is, immunity doesn't mean people can't talk about you. I've got a cousin who works in galactic journalism. She'd love to hear about how 3 Velcrin nobles dined and dashed at one of the most prestigious restaurants on the station. That kind of story spreads fast on the nets. Might even reach the Velcrin hegemony. Wonder how your families would feel about that. The smallest Velcrin spoke for the first time, his harmonics edged with uncertainty. This is blackmail. No, Julian corrected. This is consequences. You made a choice to eat here, and now you're trying to avoid paying for it. I'm just helping you understand why that's a bad idea. He leaned against their table, casual but unmistakably threatening. Here's my offer. You pay your bill right now, including a generous tip for the waitress you insulted. In exchange, I forget this conversation ever happened. Your ship stays uninspected, no stories get written, and you get to leave with your dignity somewhat intact. And if we refuse? Crimson asked, though his voice had lost its confident edge. Julian's smile widened. Then I make 3 calls, and you spend the next month dealing with legal problems, media coverage, and the fact that everyone in this sector will know you as the nobles who were too cheap to pay for dinner. Your choice. The Valkyrin conferred in their native language, a series of chimes and clicks too rapid for the translators to follow. Finally, Crimson turned back to Julian, his crystalline body rigid with barely suppressed rage. Very well, we will ... pay. Great decision. Julian stepped back, gesturing to Scarlet. The lady will take your payment now. With movements that suggested they were being physically pained, the Velcrin transferred the credits 18,000, plus a 4,000 credit tip. Scarlet's datapad chimed as the payment registered, her eyes widening at the amount. The 3 nobles swept out of the restaurant without another word, their crystalline structures somehow seeming less magnificent than before. The restaurant remained silent for a moment before erupting in a mixture of whispers and quiet applause. Julian returned to his table as if nothing had happened, picking up his half-finished coffee. Scarlet followed him, sliding into the seat across from him. Julian, that tip, it's way too much. You didn't have to. I didn't do anything, Julian said, grinning. They paid what they owed, plus standard gratuity. The fact that their guilty conscience made them overpay, that's on them. You were bluffing, weren't you? About the customs inspection and the journalist cousin. Julian's grin widened. Actually, I do have a cousin in journalism. Whether she'd be interested in this story is another question. But the customs thing, totally a bluff. I have no idea what's on their ship. Scarlet laughed despite herself. You're insane. Maybe, Julian admitted. But here's what I've learned about the galaxy. Most species think humans are weak because we don't have natural armor or enhanced strength or telepathic abilities. What they forget is that humans have something more dangerous. We're vindictive as hell when someone messes with our people. He raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. We don't need to be the strongest or the smartest. We just need to be willing to make your life more difficult than it's worth to cheat us. That's the human advantage. Scarlet touched her datapad, transferring half the tip to Julian's account. When he started to protest, she cut him off. Shut up and take it. Partners in crime should split the take. Julian laughed, accepting the transfer. Through the viewport behind them, the Andromeda Gate shimmered with ships from 1,000 worlds, each one carrying species that thought themselves superior to humanity. But tonight, in a restaurant on Station Osai, a human with nothing but audacity and loyalty had reminded them why you didn't mess with Earth's children. Sometimes, the greatest weapon wasn't strength or technology, it was simply refusing to back down. And humans, as the galaxy was slowly learning, never backed down.